Building a functioning state requires a constitution designed as a precise engineering blueprint. While often treated as a collection of philosophical ideals, the document's primary role is to define the mechanical constraints of power. In a poorly engineered state, legislative and executive branches leak into one another, eventually fusing into a single, centralized monopoly of power. This centralization is visible in parliamentary systems, where the legislature appoints the executive or constructs a cabinet through post-election deals. In these models, the separation of power exists only in theory. Designing a government around the assumed moral goodwill of its operators is a catastrophic structural failure. A machine built on the hope that its components will never experience friction is a machine destined to break. Current political instability is rarely a matter of individual character. It is the result of structural leaks that allow power to pool in the center, regardless of who is in charge. We can test an alternative model by applying these mechanics to a specific geographic context, the borders of Serbia. The objective is to replace easily manipulated political traditions with a hard-coded system of representation. We replace subjective election promises with inescapable mechanical constraints. Governance moves from a matter of personal discretion to a matter of system compliance. This transformation relies on two interventions: detaching the legislature from pure physical geography and locking the executive into a pre-verified contract. This engineering-first approach moves past the cycle of centralized power and the failed search for a political savior by fixing the engine of the state itself. A single-chamber legislature is volatile. Without internal friction, it remains susceptible to sudden populist takeovers that can reshape the entire legal landscape on a whim. The solution is a dual-chamber legislative system, where laws must navigate a series of compartmentalized checks. This schematic details the foundational block of the legislative branch. The lower house, the legislative and project house, drafts and passes laws. Beneath it sits the Senate, acting as a filter, vetting every output of the lower assembly. A law cannot take effect unless the Senate confirms it. This mechanism halts reactionary or poorly constructed legislation before it can impact the state. This split creates a deliberate resistance within the system, preventing any single legislative faction from rapidly consolidating power. Unlike systems where wealth or party loyalty buy entry to upper chambers, this Senate is gated by a strict, mandatory pipeline. Entry to the Senate requires navigating the lower tiers of governance first, with candidates proving their administrative capability in the lower assembly or regional government. This requirement populates the chamber with seasoned administrators, filtering out charismatic outsiders who lack a verifiable record of governance. This vetted Senate then serves as the exclusive pool from which all higher executive power can be drawn. By making the Senate the only pathway to the executive, the system ensures that those handling the highest levels of state power have a documented track record within the administration. Standard elections often lead to mandate betrayal. A president wins on generalities, then constructs a cabinet through hidden backroom deals. The executive binary contract eliminates this post-election horse trading by locking the candidate's choices before a single vote is cast. A presidential candidate must run as a locked unit alongside a pre-declared cabinet of exactly 5 ministers. These portfolios are foreign affairs, interior, defense, health, and infrastructure. Every individual on this ticket must be pulled directly from the vetted Senate pool. Before the election, the Senate presents the ticket with a maximum of 10 unambiguous policy questions. The candidate must answer yes or no to each prompt. Upon election, these answers lock into place as a 4-year constitutional obligation. These choices cannot be reversed or negotiated away by the executive branch. Any deviation from these pre-election answers requires a full national referendum, stripping the executive of the discretion to abandon their mandate. This contract solves the problem of post-election betrayal by making the candidate's platform a binding mechanical constraint of their office. The lower assembly remains vulnerable to gerrymandering, the manipulation of geographic district lines to isolate or group specific voters for political gain. To defeat this, we split the 250-member assembly into 2 distinct types of representation. The first 125 seats are territorial, based on where a citizen lives. These territorial lines are inherently susceptible to redrawing, which can dilute the power of specific voter groups. The remaining 125 seats are based on professional and socio-economic identity, organized into political interest communities. These communities represent demographics like educators, engineers, medical professionals, and pensioners. Citizens electronically register for an interest community, ensuring the demographic's actual size translates directly to legislative power. This structure provides a safeguard against manipulation. It is impossible to draw a geographic border through a profession. True representation is achieved by moving past physical maps and ensuring that socio-economic realities have a direct, unalterable seat at the table. This flowchart represents a synchronized government, a machine where every component serves a specific interlocking function. Power flows from the citizens into both the geographic and political interest community nodes of the Assembly. The Assembly then acts as a filter, populating the Senate only with those who have navigated the administration's entry requirements. Finally, the Senate provides the exclusive pool for the executive branch, which is then bound by the binary contract. This zero-trust architecture removes the levers of manipulation, forcing the executive to operate within the specific parameters defined by the voters and the Assembly. Stabilizing a state is a challenge of systems design. The solution is found by optimizing the engine of government rather than relying on the personal virtue of individual leaders.